Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. We have a kind of a long one today, but a very important topic, which is Firestore CRUD operations. Lots of videos out there that are shorter. Maybe you should watch those first. But in my video, I'm going to dive into three of the things that I think are very important to build a large-scale app with Firestore CRUD. Those are a good model, a good service, and a good state management system. And we're going to use provider, change notifier provider as our state management system in this one. We'll keep the intro short because there's a lot of content here, so get yourself a big cup of coffee, a nice comfy chair, and let's get started.
All right, step one is to get yourself a Firebase project if you do not have one already. So if you don't, I'm going to use one that I use for a lot of my coding demos. But if you don't, you can click on Add Project. You're going to get a question about whether you want to enable Firebase or Google Analytics. You can decline that at this time, and you will get yourself a project. Step two is to get yourself a database. So once you have your project, you can click on database. And by the way, I have the Blaze plan here. It will probably default you to Spark, which is the free one, and that will work just fine for this tutorial. I have Blaze because I use this for other tutorials, but Spark is perfectly adequate for this tutorial and is free. So that's the one you want to go with. Database, when you click on database, the first time you do that, you're going to have an option to create a Cloud Firestore database. You want to click on that. It is going to ask you whether you want to start your database in test mode or production mode. Pick test mode because that will create rules that are completely open. If you created one that's in production and you want to change the rules, you can change the rules by clicking on the Rules tab. Change it to what I have here, and that will make it basically open for you, and we don't have to worry about permissions as we go. All right, with that done, we want to create a project that we can start to, Flutter project that we can hook to our Firebase project. So let's go to a terminal. And I am going to create Flutter, or type Flutter create Firestore_CRUD. All right, and let's open that with code. If you have that in your path, you can type code dot, and I'm going to do the dash or the flag for a new window. And I didn't change directories before I hit that. All right, let's do cd Firestore CRUD. Now we'll do that. Whew. Firing on all cylinders today. Here we go. Excellent. All right, so we want to set up Android first. And let's start with the package name. So the package name is going to be an Android app, src main Android manifest, and they'll give you a default one. You can use that. If you have any ambitions of changing that down the road, you should probably do it now. It's going to be easiest if you start your Firebase project connected. So you can leave yours as is. I am going to just demonstrate how to change that. I'll go to com.julo.firestore_crud is what I will call my package. And that is all set there. And then for the iOS side, you're going to want to open Xcode. And you're going to want to open your project. So you go in there, you go to Firestore CRUD, you go to iOS, and you're going to want to open the XC workspace file. And under runner, you will have your, they're going to call it a bundle identifier, same thing as the package ID for Android. So whatever you changed it to in Android, you want it to be the same for iOS. And leave Xcode open. We're going to need it in a minute. So once you have that set, you're ready to link this project to Firebase. And there are a couple different instructions out there. I prefer the one on Firebase. So when you're in Firebase, if you go to Docs, you can click on either Get Started with Android, Get Started for iOS. It doesn't matter because we're just trying to get to a page that has a menu down the side that has this option of use Firebase with a framework, and the Flutter instructions are there. And this starts pretty high level. It'll actually ask you to install Flutter SDK, all that stuff. Create a Firebase project. So you can walk through this and kind of make sure you have all the boxes checked before you get going. We did all this. So we want to come and register our app with Firebase. Up at the top here, we've got some chips. So I'm going to start with Android. So register our app with Firebase. This is the step we're on. So we want to come back here. We want to go to Project Overview. Okay, so we want to add an app. Let's start with Android. And this is where the package name goes. So this needs to be 100% consistent with what you have here in your Android manifest. So I'll paste that in here. And the rest of this is optional. You can give it a nickname. This is for the signing certificate for Google Sign-In and some other advanced features of Firebase. You can come back and add this later if you need it. So we'll click Register App. Want to download my Google Services JSON. I just like to look in my download directory and make sure I don't have some kicking around from my last download, which I do. And if you do, you're just going to get a one, like a parentheses 1 version. And you can sort that out from there, but I'll get rid of them. Oop. Meant to click download. There we go. And so I get this Google Services JSON, and I want to put that. It will say right here. Actually blanking on where that's going to go. Add Firebase config file. We want it in Android app. All right. So Android app right there. So it'll come down below this build.gradle file. Let's just refer back to the instructions. So we have some requirements for our root level build.gradle. We need to make sure we have this Google dependency in repositories. We need to make sure we have the Google dependency in all project repositories down here. And we need a class path dependency. So I'm going to copy that. We're going to look at build.gradle. Actually, this one here, app level. So I see we've got Google under the build script repositories. I see we've got it under all projects, so we're all set there, but we don't have this dependency here. So we'll add that in, and so I got this right out of here. All right, and then in our app level build.gradle, which is here, they would like us to make sure that we are applying this plugin right here. So let's grab that. Look for the apply plugins. So here we are. Add that. And then the last step is to add Flutter Fire plugins. That's a last step for iOS as well. So let's skip to iOS for now, and then we'll come back and add those plugins before we launch the application. So we can flip our chip over to iOS, and we want to come back here. We can skip through all this, continue back to the console. We have an Android app. We want to add another app. That'll be an iOS app. And so we need to make sure that this is exactly the same as our package ID. So I'll just copy it from Xcode just to make sure it's 100% the same. Click Register App. It's going to try to walk you through some steps here. You do not want to follow them. These are for a native platform. So at this point, we want to download this Google Services info plist and skip back to our Flutter instructions. So we have registered our app with Firebase. We just did that now. We want to add the configuration file, and it says we want to download the Google Services info plist, which I just did. And we want to put it in, using Xcode, we want to put it in runner/runners. So we'll pull up Xcode. And we will open my There we go. We'll put this runner/runner finish. And at this point, you should close Xcode, because when you fire up the emulator, the Xcode is going to start to get confused about the changes that are being made outside the emulator. So go ahead and close it. Quit Xcode. You no longer need it. And we're at this step of adding Flutter Fire plugins, which we were at with Android as well. So let's do that. We're going to go to pub.dev. And we're going to search Firebase _core. And we're going to grab that. We'll grab the installing tab. We'll grab the dependencies, and we will take that to our Android, or excuse me, pubspec.yaml. So I'm going to close Android and iOS tabs at this time. We'll go to pubspec.yaml, and we will add Firebase core right after Cupertino icons. And the other one we want is Firestore. I'm just going to search Firestore. Cloud Firestore, cloud _ Firestore. Go to installing, grab that dependency, if you can. Put it in pubspec.yaml. And since we're here, I want to grab provider as well. We're going to use that. So we'll go to provider, go to installing, grab that. And one more, I want to grab UUID. And this is what we're going to use to generate a unique ID when we input a record into Firestore. So again, go to the installing tab, grab the latest version, and paste that into your pubspec.yaml. Hit save, let VS Code do its import. And we are ready to start the application. So don't be surprised if this takes longer than you are used to it taking to fire up your emulator. It's got some work to do, so I am going to go to lib main.dart, start debugging, and then I'm going to hit pause while it does that. All right, and we get the Flutter demo app in all its glory. The important thing we're looking for here is anything in the debug console that might trigger the fact that our setup is incorrect, and we don't have that. If you are experiencing issues, I would definitely go back and revisit this document here and maybe cover some of the steps up here that we didn't, just to make sure you have all the prerequisites established before you start this up. All right, but assuming you got this far, what I think it makes the most sense. I mean, we talked in the opener about the importance of a good model, a good service, and a good state management system. And if you get to the point where you are comfortable with this, it makes sense to start there and work your way up to a user interface. But I think for the purpose of learning and syncing and getting this to sink in, it makes sense to do the opposite. Start with a user interface, and as we get to an element, and do the pieces that we need to do in the back end to make that element work. So we can also just kind of check ourselves and make sure things are working as we go. So in the lib folder, let's create a screens folder. And what I'd like to do in here is create two widgets. We'll create one that we'll call edit _ product.dart, and that will be our detail screen with the fields of our model. And it will be dual purpose, so we can add a product there. We can also edit an existing product, and I'm just going to create a simple product that has a name and a price. Basically, is all there is to it. And then another screen it will create. So let's create a new file that will be products.dart, and that's just going to be a list screen of our existing products so that we can click on those, go to the detail screen, and do what we need to do there. All right, so to get something on the screen, let's start with edit product. And so this will be a class of edit product. And I'm going to make this a stateful widget. And the reason I'm going to do that is we are going to use controllers eventually to populate the text fields if the record already exists. So if we're moving into an edit, and controllers require you to dispose of them when you're done to free up those resources. And for that, we're going to want a stateful widget. I'm actually going to say extends stateless widget. I'm going to do my build, and then I'm going to use Visual Studio Code to convert it to a stateful widget to save me from having to type all that extra code. If you have a plugin that does that for you, that's great. I don't like to install those because I don't want to assume that anybody has certain plugins here, so I just kind of stick to the basics for my plugins. All right, so let's do just a scaffold here, and we can create an app bar, and we'll create an app bar widget with a title, which is a text widget that says edit products. Or edit product is fine. All right, I'll code format that. So let's skip out to our products page here, and let's create a class of products, and that will extend a stateless widget, which we will actually use a real stateless widget. It's not just a scam. All right, and this will also return a scaffold. It'll have an app bar. It'll have a title, and we'll create a text widget that says products. All right, I'll save that, code format that. And also on this page, I want some actions in the header so that I can click on them. I'm going to take this fab icon out because that's very material, and I'm just going to put it up here in the header. So in our app bar, I'm going to put actions, and for an actions, I'm going to create an icon button that basically does the same thing. So icon button, icon will be icon, icons.add. And I'm going to make it a little bigger than standard. So let's make a size of 30. And that's going to need an onPress method. And so what we want is when somebody presses it, we want it to go to the detail page. So let's do navigator of context.push, and we'll push a material page route. We'll give it a builder, we'll give it a context. It goes to edit product. And we'll need to bring in edit product like so. And that should be fine. So let's get rid of this main, and so we can actually start to see what we did on the screen. I don't like to do too much before we actually test it and move on. So in main, let's take out this big block of green gobbledygook there and class my home page down. Take all of that out. And for a home page, we want products, which is our list. All right, if I save that, I get my screen here. This used to kind of freak out on me when you've done that many changes. Recently it started actually working and not needing to be restarted. But if you have errors at this point, stop it and restart it. But we've got our products here. We don't have any products yet, but we click this, we can go to edit product, and this is where we'll handle adds and edits. All right, so let's start to sketch out this edit page. So if you're on products, let's go to edit products so we can see our work. And so we have an app bar. Let's build a body, and let's do a list view with children. And so what I picture here is we'll have two text boxes, one that will take the name of the product, The second that will take the price and then a button to add the product and a button to delete the product. So here, I'll do a text field. And I'll do a decoration. So I'm not going to do a label. I'll just do a hint text. So I'll just do product name there. And I'll add a comma. I'm just going to copy that, paste it down below for our product price. Both my cat and my dog are snoring behind me. I hope you can't hear that. So there we go. And then we'll do a raised button with a child of text, which says save, and an on press, which we will leave blank for now. And then I'll add the comma. I'm going to copy that, and we'll create a delete button right below it. Delete. I can do it. There we go. And we're not going to worry about a lot of things you should worry about in an app like validation here, but and we're not going to have a verification on the delete either, but at least let's make it look a little scary. So let's do a color, colors.red, and text color. Yeah, text color, colors.white. So that at least looks like something we shouldn't mess with unless we're serious about it. Let's do a size box in between raised button just to create a little bit of space. So the height of 20 should do it. Create a little space there. And then lastly, just to not have it look terrible, let's surround our list view with some padding. And would you just leave the default at 8? I just don't want it to sit right on the edge like that. All right, so we have a really good idea of the fields that we're looking for now. So now might be a good time to break from the UI and to actually build our model, because we know we need a name, we need a price, and if we're going to be putting this in a database, we always want to think about having an ID as well. So we're looking at 3 fields in our model. So let's build it. Let's go to lib folder. Let's create a new folder. Let's create a models folder, and in the models folder, we will create product.dart, and that will be a class product. And so we want to define our fields or our properties up top, and so we want a final string, and we'll build an ID. Let's call it product ID, and let's do a string. We'll call name, and then a final double, I think, will work well for the price. And then we need a constructor for the object. So let's do product and do a name constructor. So I'll do curly braces. And we'll just do this dot product ID, this dot price, this dot name. The order doesn't matter since they are named. And we can do a semicolon at the end there, and that defines our model. So 3 fields, a constructor. We're not done there. We're going to need to come back and do some more work to this to interface with Firestore, but at least we've got our basic Dart object defined. Now we also have a pretty good idea of what we're going to need for state management. And so let's add a new folder to lib, and let's create a providers folder. And inside of there, let's create product underscore provider.dart. So this will be our backend code, and we will use class product provider, and we'll use with change notifier, which needs to be imported from material.dart. And we will want to pretty much mirror the properties that we have in our model. We want private variables for each one of those. So we'll have a string that is underscore name, double that is underscore price, and the underscore is to keep it private. That's the That's the marker in Dart for a private variable, and a string that is underscore product ID. And we'll want some getters and setters, so we'll do some getters here. Our string get name goes to name, and a double get of price will expose our private price variable. So these are the public getters for these private variables. And then we're going to want some setters. So we'll want to be able to change the name. So we'll get a value, a string value. And we'll set the name equal to our value. And then we'll want to call notify listeners. And that way, if anybody is listening, if any widget is listening to this name property, every time we change it, they're going to get the benefit of that change. If you forget to call notify listeners, they won't get it, and you'll be frustrated as to why that's happening. So we'll also change price, and this will take a string value. So we're going to hook this to the text field. And the text fields, every time somebody types in them, back here, we're going to add a function. Every time somebody types in them, we're going to pass the value back to our provider. And that's going to be a string. Everything from a text field is a string. We want a double, and we can make that conversion here. So we can say the price is going to be equal to double.parse value. And don't forget notify listeners. And we'll come back here and do a little bit more work as well. But we now have, we now know we're going to need a name and a price and some way to get and set those. And so we have that now. So let's come back here to our edit product. And I just mentioned we're going to hook these text fields into our provider. So let's do that now. So on text field, there is a onChanged property. And we're going to get a value every time the text field is changed. And we want to call our provider and call the change name or change price function every time that happens. All right, so to do that, we want to bring in our provider. So let's come out and put our provider in the widget tree. So let's come out to main.dart. And what I'd like to do is use provider to inject that provider, use provider to inject the provider that we've created into the widget tree so that we can then call it downstream in our edit product page. So let's use VS Code's wrap widget, and we're going to set up a change notifier provider as part of the provider package. We are going to create, we're going to use a context, and we are going to use an instance of our product provider like that. And I need to import provider, so let me do that. All right, so what this does is it's going to create our product provider, an instance of our product provider. It's going to pass it into the widget tree, just one instance of that product provider, and it's going to be accessible in the widget tree from anywhere below that, anywhere below the main.dart, which is everything. So our edit product page is going to be able to come inside the build method, and we are going to be able to bring in our product provider because it's going to be equal to provider, which we'll need to import, .of context. And this is a generic, so we can tell it we want an instance of our product provider. And I need to import that as well. There we go. Okay, and restart the state. If you got that error, just restart it. We're doing too many things, and the state got confused. All right, so here in our onChange method, I can call in product provider change name, and pass it that value. And then I can come down here and do the same thing for changed price. And if you prefer this syntax, you can do that as well here. Just keep it all in one line instead of the curly braces. All right, so in theory, when we come here, we type something. We are passing this to our backend, and it sure would be nice to confirm that. So why don't we hook up the save button to something that at least tells us that we have done that part right. And since I've kind of organized my backend code into my product provider for products, I'll go ahead and add a save function to product provider. So I'll come down here before the class closes, and I will add a save product function. And I don't need to pass it anything because we have the variables up here, and hopefully they're populated. So let's just print. Let's just do name. Let's do, there, we'll do name. We'll do comma, and then we'll do price. All right, so if I click save there, we need to hook that up. So I've got the save products, but I need to actually put it on the raise button. So we've got a blank function here. Let's do product provider, save product. Well, let me try that. And there we go. So we get apples and we get 25. So that is working. So next, it would be nice to actually send this to the database so that we know that that part is working. So let's create a service now. So inside our library folder, we will create a folder called services. And inside there, we'll create a file called firestore_service.dart. And it will be a class of Firestore service. So here we want to bring in an instance of Firestore. So Firestore, we'll call it _db, and that is going to be equal to firestore.instance, and I'll need to bring in Firestore like that. So that's a reference to our database. And so the first function we're going to need in our service to interact with Firestore is a save product, so that we can actually pass that product that we just created here to the database. So that'll be a future. It'll return a void. We'll call it save product, and we'll pass it our product object. And we will do db.collection. And so the collection that we want to create or use throughout this is called products. And you can add directly to a collection. You will get an auto-generated ID, and I don't like to do that. I like to use a different syntax where you give it a specific document, and this winds up being an upsert. Product ID. We'll do set data, and this is where we pass our product, not in that format. But what we do here is the set data is we give it a document ID. So we'll create one in our provider before we call save product. That'll be a unique identifier. That it becomes our ID that also goes in the record. And if that document exists, it will update it. If it doesn't exist, it will create it. So this save product, I didn't put insert product and update product. I put save product because it will do both. All right, we have two problems here. One is that product hasn't been imported yet, so we can take care of that. The other is that a Dart object is not what the Firestore database is looking for. They are looking for a map, and so we need to convert this from an object to a map, and the best place to do that is in our model. So let's create a helper function that will take care of that operation every time we need to do that for Firestore. All right, so coming back to models product.dart, we want to turn our object into a map. So let's do map of type string.dynamic, and we'll call toMap, and we will return this nice little map we create. We will tell it the Firestore property that we want to create and the Dart object that we want to create, or the Dart object property we want to create. So that's product ID, we have name, and then we have price. Our naming convention for Dart and Firestore is exactly the same. It might be different if you wanted to. So you could just map, if you had product underscore ID in Firestore, you could map that to product ID in the Dart object like that. If you wanted to, we have them all the same. All right, so that takes our object, turns it into a map so that we can then just call toMap on our product. And lastly, we just need to return that. And let me just widen that. That is our call to add a product and also update a product in Firestore. All right, so now that we have that, let's go back to our provider, and we created a save product function, and we just had it print. But let's actually have it add to the database. So in product provider, let's bring in an instance of our service. So we'll do final Firestore service is equal to an instance of Firestore service with a capital. And we'll import it, and we'll spell it right. And we'll stop hitting enter for no apparent reason. There you go. Whew. I'm worried about myself there. Okay, so we can create Firestore service.saveProduct. And this is where we want to pass it a product. So let's come up above here and just create ourselves a new product variable. So that's going to be a new product. It's going to have a name here. It'll have a price of price. And it will have a product ID. And this is important because we want to control this so that we're able to put it in the record so that we then have the reference to the document to be able to retrieve it and get it later. And this is why I wanted to use the UUID package. Why we installed that at the beginning. So let's create a variable up here that is UUID, and that's just going to be equal to an instance of that UUID package, or the class from the package. And our product ID is going to be equal to UUID, and then we'll do v4, slightly different formatting for each one of these. You can check the documentation if that matters to you, but we'll do v4. We'll import product, and then pass it a new product there. Follow that up with a semicolon. Whoops, my emulator stopped. Let's restart that. All right, so in theory now, we hit this. We should be able to add apples at $1.25, hit save, and pull up our database. And if you're sitting on the database, when you first add a collection, you're going to have to hit refresh. After that, they will dynamically add in front of you. But there we go. We got apples, $1.25. The ID that we created, or the UUID package created, is here, and it's also the reference. So when we need this document, we could just pass Firestore a reference to this document, and it will get it very fast. It doesn't have to search for it. All right, so let's just add I just noticed it didn't actually close the screen when we hit the save button there, so let's just add a pop here. Navigator of context.pop. All right. So when we come out of here, we know we've got this record in our database, but we're not seeing it yet on products. So let's actually display the products here so we can take the next step of clicking on them so that we can update them. And for that, we're going to need to go back to our Firestore service, and we need to write a getter for all the products. And that is going to be a stream, and we are going to make it a stream of type list product. So make sure you get two closers there. Call it get products. All right, and this is a long one, so let me stretch this way out here. But basically we want to reference our collection, which is products. And when we do that, we can get a future by calling get documents, or we can get a stream by calling snapshots. And we want a stream, so let's do snapshots. And then let's map that. We'll call it a snapshot object. And that snapshot object will contain a collection of documents. We want to map those documents to a document object. And the document object creates data it contains data that is a map that we can then turn into our object. So that's where we want to go. Now, we don't yet have a method for taking a map and turning it into an object. We have a method for doing the opposite, taking an object and turning it into a map. So we just want to revisit our model and do one final thing. Okay, so let's go to models. Let's go to product.dart. This is our to map. So let's get a from map option. So we'll call that product.fromFirestore. We'll pass it a map with string keys and dynamic values. And we'll call that Firestore. All right, and we want to go to the next line. We want a colon, and we want to start mapping our Dart properties to our Firestore properties. And they're all named the same as their Dart equivalent. Name will equal Firestore or Firestore bracket name. Price. And when you're on the last, you do a semicolon. All right, so now our model is equipped to do that. So if we come back to services Firestore service, we can call that. So we can do product.fromFirestore and pass it a map, which we have here if we do document.data. All right, end that with a semicolon. This is going to be a collection, but not a list. So we want to come outside or inside the last parenthesis and cast it to a list. And then lastly, we want to return all that. So let me expand that for you. I know that's big. You could create a collection or a reference variable to kind of take this part at least and shorten it a little bit. But we take a collection of our products. We take the snapshots we get from that products collection. We map them to a snapshot object. We get all of the document objects that are on the snapshot object. We map each one of those. We collect the data from that document and we pass it to our model and we create a Dart object from it. All right, beautiful. Now we want to bring this into our widget tree, and this is where another instance where provider would come in handy. Provider can establish that stream, and then we can reference it or get a reference to it at any point in our widget tree. And so if we come up here to main.dart, we could wrap our material app. We could create another wrap of our material app and get a stream provider that would allow us to access that stream. Or we can create a multi-provider here with a providers property and an array of providers. we can reestablish our change notifier provider by putting this back in there. And now to that array, we can add our stream provider, which will be the get products call from our service. So let's bring in the service. So inside of build, we want final Firestore service, and we will create an instance of our Firestore service. So then our stream provider can be create context, and we will give it Firestore service get products. And now that stream is there anytime we want to use it in the app. We only call it once, and then we can reference it at any point throughout the application, which in this application is going to be a pretty minimal amount of times. But in a larger application, you establish it once, it's always there when you need it. All right, so if we go to our products, inside screens, and we go to our products, I'm going to shrink this back so we can see the emulator again. Inside of our build, we can bring in our stream. So we can say our products is going to be equal to provider dot, and we'll need to import provider of context, semicolon there, and then you tell it what you're looking for. And what we're going to have is a list of products. So it's going to resolve the whole stream part for us. We don't need a stream builder in here. Provider is going to take care of that, and we're just going to get a list of products. My auto import has been a little slow lately. All right, so down here below in our app bar, or below our app bar, we want to create a body. And let's check to make sure products does not equal null. And in that case, we will, I'm all over the map here. This is where we'll give a list view, and we'll do a list view builder. And I'm gonna move the question mark down here, and then I'm gonna move item builder down 2 and tab it over a little bit. So let's do item count products.length. So we'll do as many tiles as there are products. And then our builder will be of context and index, and then we'll give curly braces, and we will return a list tile. All right. So after my builder, I still need to come up with an alternate. So if the products is not equal to null, then we're building the list. Otherwise, I want a circular progress indicator. So as this is loading, we'll get a circular progress indicator. And I am going to center that. Not a column. Wrap with center. There we go. All right, and then for my list tile, we'll keep this pretty simple. Let's just do a title, which will be a text of products index.name, and then a trailing of text products index.price. We're not going to worry about formatting dollars and all that stuff. And I got product ID and I meant price. And I need to cast that to string. There we go. And so ideal behavior would be that I click on this, it takes me to the details screen, and it's all pre-populated, and I can edit the apple's price or the spelling of it or give it a different title or whatever. So to do that, we want an on-tap method. And we want navigator.ofContext.push material page route. Builder context, and we'll send that to edit product. I should have just copied this up here. I'll save that, do a little code formatting, click here, and there we go. I go to edit product. We're not yet loaded with the products on the page, so let's take care of that next. So if we flip back to our edit product page in screens, one strategy here might be to pass in the product that we're dealing with from the list. So we're clicking on a product here. We know what it is, and we're calling it. So when we call the material page route, we could pass that information or the product object right into this widget, and then we could populate this screen. So to do that, we would need a constructor. So if we come up here to the top, first of all, we want a variable to pass in. So let's do product of product. And so we pass in our product, but remember, we want to be able to use this as an add form and an update form. And so if we're adding, we don't have anything to pass. So we want to make this optional. So we use square brackets for that. And we say this.product. And now you can optionally pass in a product. And so, emulator keeps crashing. Let's start that again. So if I come back to products now, so I go to screen, I go to products. When I call this product, edit product page from the list view, I want to pass it products index, prod docs. Oh, lowercase there. There we go. So now in my edit product page, if I have a product, I'm updating, and if I don't, I'm editing. And we're going to need to do some work down here in the code to update the way we handle that situation when the page loads. All right, for starters, we want to bring in a couple of controllers. And so we'll do a final name controller, and that is a text editing controller. We'll do a final price controller, also equal to a text editing controller. And I mentioned that we're doing a stateful widget because whenever you use a text editing controller, you do need to dispose of that. So let's create a dispose method. And take care of both of those. All right, so now we need a little logic. If we have a product, we want to preload the product details to the text field. And so in a stateful widget, init state would be a good place to do that. So we only do it once. So we'll do an if statement, and we want to know if our widget.product equals null, because if that's the case, this is a new record. Else, it's an existing record. And if it's new record, we want to set the controllers.text value to blank strings. Now that's the default value, but if you remember, we're using one page, we're recycling it. If you go out come back in with a product you're editing, you go out and you try to add, those values are still in there, may still be stuck. So we want to actually clear out the text fields if they have values in them. So we will do price controller dot text equal to that. All right, so then if we do have a product that we passed into the widget, then we want to set name controller dot text equal to widget dot product dot name, and we'll set price controller dot text equal to widget dot product dot price. Come on now. ToString. All right, so that takes care of setting the text fields when you enter the page. So you can see that works okay. We're populated. But the backend data, the provider, has not been updated. All you've done is set the text fields. Now, when you came in here and we added a brand new record, we didn't have to do that because as we typed, this function right here on each one of our text fields updated the provider and kept everything in sync. Now, we're not getting that benefit when we are just dynamically populating the text field with code. So we need to also let the provider, the backend code, know what the new values are. So down here in the update case, where we do have a product that we passed in, we want to call a function on our provider that updates those fields. So let's create that first, actually. So let's go to product provider, and below change price, let's do load values, and we will pass it a product, and we will just go through each one and set our underscore, our private variable, equal to its equivalent in product. So product name is the same as name, price is the same as product price, and product ID is going to be equal to product.product ID. All right, so when we call that, we pass it a product, we're going to have all our backend values will be in sync with our form field right here. So let's call that. We built it in our provider, so we need to bring in our provider like this. Except you will notice that we have no context here to actually pass to provider. But the way you can get around that in a stateful widget is a little hacky, but anytime you're in an init state or a dispose method and you need the context, you can do that by creating a new future .delayed with a duration of 0, comma, parentheses, create the function, semicolon there, and you will get a context inside here. So you can bring this in here, paste that in there, and then you can call product provider load values. That's what I called it, right? Yeah. And we will pass that widget.product. And this, when you come into this page, this will update the controllers. And this will update the state. All right, now when I do this and I leave and I come out, it's going to bark at me down here, and it's going to say something like it is unsupported because may pointlessly rebuild the widget associated to the event handler when the widget tree doesn't care about the value. Now, Provider and Dart is smart enough to know, hey, this is an init state method. We call it once and then we're done. Why is this person wanting to sit around and listen to this product provider? And we don't. And we have an option here to pass in a second argument when we bring in our provider to say listen equals false. And if I do that, I clear this error, and I come back in again, I get the value, I don't get the error. All right, so this basically uses the product provider as just a class reference, and it's not going to listen to it like our provider down here is in our build method, where we do want that going on. So this updates the product if we pass it a value. So if we're clicking on something, it's going to pass apples, it's going to pass the $1.25, it's going to pass the product ID. Now that's stuck in our backend code, in our provider. So if we were to click on add, all that is still there. So what we did here, we want to do again for add, but this time we don't want to pass it that. We just want to pass it a blank product. So if it's an add, we want to clear out the ID, we want to clear out the name, we want to clear out the price from the backend logic, and let the user start to type, and then let our UUID determine what the new user ID will be. All right, so if we give that a test, we pull this down, we go into apples, we update it to $1.26, we hit save, and my Firebase console is being funky. But we can see we have apples at $1.26 now. Let me go out and come back in because I want to see this. We've earned it. All right, so there's our product, our apples. We change that to $1.27. We will immediately see it update here in the database. Bingo. If we go to add a new product, we are hoping that it recognizes that it's a new product. So we're adding pears at $2, and we see a new record with pears at $2 right there. So we have our CRUD. We just need the duh to do CRUD. So last step is to delete. So let's bring this back up here. Let's go to our Firestore service, and let's set up a delete function. So that is a future of type void, and we'll call that remove product. And we will return _db.collection, and our collection is still products. We want to grab our document, and our remove document, we're going to want to pass a string with a product ID. That's all we need here. We can pass it the product ID and simply say delete. All right, then we can skip over to our provider's product provider here, and we will need a remove product function here. And that will just be to call Firestore service dot remove product, and we will also need a string of product ID. All right, and then we can move to our screens edit product. Almost there, folks. We go to our raise button here. This is our delete function, and we can go to product provider, remove product, and we can pass it widget dot product ID. We also will want to add a navigator of context.pop, so we can copy that from above. All right, let's give that a spin. So let's get rid of our pairs, and they are gone from there. And lo and behold, they are gone from the database as well. So we now have CRUD operations. Now, we've got some goofiness here. For one thing, when you go to add, you can delete here, and that's probably going to give us an error because we have no product ID. So we could do something like this. Widget.product not equal to null. Then we'll display our raised button. Otherwise, we will have just an empty container. So we could do that. That would take care of the save button there, or the delete button. The other thing you may have noticed if you're watching really astutely is that there really was no actual requirement of using the provider or the change notifier provider. We never actually called any of these getters, so there really was no need to listen for these values. Why did I put them there? In fact, you really could have gone to the service, Firebase service, for just about everything that we did. A lot of CRUD videos, they do that. Why did I build in a state management system? And the answer is, if you are going to build any app of any consequence, you are going to need a state management system. And so this is a structure that you can build up on. For example, right now, we can hit save when there are no values in our field and it crashes our app. So you're going to need to validate that app, and the place you're going to want to put the logic is here in your state management system. So when somebody clicks change price, you're going to want to make sure this can parse to a double before you allow it to set to the price here. You're going to want to actually interfere here, do with a try or a catch, and throw an error if they put a letter in the price. You're also going to want to hook the button up to something back here in the backend code that says, okay, this is a valid submission, so I can't do what I just did. So I think these three parts are very essential to a CRUD operation. Having that model that can do all these things that we talked about, not only set your properties, but change your Dart object to a map so that Firestore can understand it. Take that Firestore map, change it to a Dart object so your application can understand it. Have a very nice, clean service that goes to Firestore, isn't cluttered with things like validation. And then have a good state management system where you can store your temporary variables, where you can put any business logic that you need to, validation, saving, this business of trying to figure out if it's a new record or a updated record. All of that stuff can go there. So really hope you found this helpful. I know this was a long one. I know this was a complex one. Please dive into it, parse it as best you can. And if you have comments, please let me know down below. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe. We'll see you in the next video.
You need to focus on if you're going to successfully work with Firestore. The first is a good model. I can't believe there's a mosquito out here. God, it's frickin' April.